Chapter 32. Firelight flickered over Romeo's stony face as he stared at Mateo from across the roof and bounced on the balls of his feet. Mateo hardly recognized this livid, wild man. Mateo, Romeo, and Balta stood atop the Eliza, near a waist-high wall around the perimeter. Crumbled stone littered the rooftop, painting Mateo's toes with dust. Romeo wore thin leather shoes, but Mateo kept his feet bare. Easier to gauge the position of the fire that way. A black oval smoldered on the ground, but all three of them stood outside it. Balta's expression was carefully neutral. He looked to neither Mateo nor Romeo, and Mateo was glad. He could only focus on Romeo. Romeo, the usurper. Romeo, the destroyer. Despite the gathering crowd below, the world felt oddly empty up here. Calm. From below came the clamor of a growing crowd. Workers, but no clear rebels. No dark gray cloaks with hoods. Rumors of Hode's death swirled in the uncertainty, he was sure. Why else would they hold the battle early? But with no firm information, it was all speculation. Until they knew for sure, he doubted the rebels would act. No, the moment to fear was when he or Romeo died. Then the rebels would advance and sow chaos. Mateo didn't hear the individual whispers from below. He heard nothing but his heartbeat and steady breath. Because he was finally ready. Tonight, he had to kill a man who had chosen to be someone else. As repulsive as it was, it had to be done. Because Romeo would do more than kill him. Romeo would take his rage and destroy everyone Mateo cared about. The incensed expression on Romeo's face left no doubt of that. Mateo didn't fight for his own life. He fought for Vittoria, Benat, Zuri, for all of the network. Balta gestured to the ring. "Contenders," he called, "advance to the oval." When they stepped up to the edge, the flames simmered to life, rising just inches from the rooftop. Barring a disaster that threatened both of their lives and prevented a reasonable conclusion to the fight, he'd be in that oval for his last breath, or Romeo's. Vittoria intruded on his thoughts, but he had to push her aside. They'd find her as soon as they could. Benat and Jaska were still searching for her. That would have to be enough. 3 of Benat's men waited in the crowd. The rest were looking for Vittoria or keeping an eye on Necci. Below, the throng grew with every passing second. Landowners weren't visible anywhere. They would be hiding. It was late night or early morning. Didn't matter. Rumors of Hode's death would have kept Necci up all night. "Brothers," Balta called, loudly enough for all to hear. He hesitated only a moment. "The rules are explicit. A fight to the death. No weapons, no magic, no outside help. If you leave the oval before I authorize it, you forfeit. This is the battle for the throne. Are there any questions?" Neither brother spoke. With a heavy swallow, Balta nodded. "Then honor awaits." They stepped into the oval, and the smoldering fire sprang upward into a shimmering orange wall twice as tall as Mateo. Balta was just visible through the thin flames. Dirt ground beneath Mateo's heel as he stepped forward. The heat urged him farther into the ring, which was 20 paces wide. Enough space to grapple, but they were still likely to get burned. Historically, most contenders used the fire to their advantage, pushing their opponent into the flames, attempting to throw them out of the oval. A dirty way to win, but it had been effective. Romeo hadn't looked away from Mateo since he'd arrived. His oddly intent gaze seemed hungry, intense, perhaps maniacal. The sounds of the crowd died away entirely in the oval, replaced by the snap and crackle of fire. The smell of an impending storm, swirling with the stench from the wharf, disappeared too. For a moment, Romeo stood there, regarding Mateo. Mateo returned the scrutiny. "Honor to you, brother," he finally said. Romeo glared. He shifted to the right. Mateo braced his weight evenly on crouched legs. All his lessons with Benat settled into his muscles. He knew this work well enough that instinct would take over once they got started. "Come at me, brother," Mateo said with a jerk of his fingers and a cold smile. Romeo's nose twitched. They circled for another breath before Romeo advanced. Although he was fast, Mateo anticipated the move and dodged. It had been an exploratory advance, not meant to hurt him, just to gauge his reach. Romeo danced back, then feinted again. Mateo slipped to the side. Romeo was moving too quickly and had to skid to a stop before he hit the edge of the oval. "You," Romeo ground out. "What are not meant for this, Mateo." "As eldest son, you mean? They chose me." "They?" Romeo yelled, then barreled at him again. Mateo dodged, but Romeo anticipated him and they collided. They toppled to the stones together. Mateo cradled his head with one arm, and his wrist took the blow instead of his head. The moment his spine hit the ground, he rolled. Romeo attempted to gain control by straddling him, but Mateo moved too fast. In seconds, they broke apart. Blood oozed from Romeo's right nostril. "You don't know what you're up against, Mateo. This is not what you think." Romeo cracked his neck. "There are things at play you have never dreamed." "Oh, like what?" Romeo crouched. The fire danced eerily over the top of him like a dark omen. Both of them already glistened with sweat. The heat from the oval pressed on Mateo with sweltering fury. Sweat trickled down his back. If Romeo kept moving so quickly, it would make it almost impossible to peg him down. Eventually, he'd tire, but so would Mateo. Mateo faked an advance, and Romeo feinted left. "It's nothing you want to be involved in," Romeo muttered. "Concede the throne to me. I know our enemies far better than you ever will." "I disagree." Romeo screamed as he charged again. They met in the middle like clashing sea dragons. Romeo reached for Mateo's throat, but Mateo's arms were longer. He dodged the hold, wrapped his arms around Romeo's leg, and slammed him to the ground. Romeo grunted, the force of the impact taking his breath away. He tried to hook his legs around Mateo's hips, but his paralyzed lungs weakened the attempt. Mateo stepped out of his way as Romeo regathered his breath. "You won't win, Romeo. I have already won." Romeo grinned. Blood dribbled onto his upper lip and stained his teeth pink. "Your La Principessa is in my control." All of Mateo's training kept him on the offensive. For half a second, he almost reacted, almost gave in to the temptation to be afraid for her. Instead, he drove his head into Romeo's midsection and dropped him to the roof. Romeo lifted a bent leg to Mateo's chest. Unable to reach his neck, Mateo punched. The blow grazed Romeo's cheek. Mateo threw another, but Romeo batted it away, grabbed his arm, and twisted. Mateo grunted and slipped free of his grip. Romeo shoved back, separating them until they both stood apart again. Romeo straightened, fury etched on every feature. But he was playing at this. He wasn't serious about killing Mateo yet, or he wouldn't be talking so much. Was he stalling? Nervous? Why didn't he just go for it already? Romeo danced back, spitting. "Mateo, forget this. You cannot win." Mateo ran at him and dropped a shoulder. Romeo moved like a cat. He slipped out of the way, forcing Mateo to fall to his back to avoid the flames. Romeo took advantage and pounced, but Mateo rolled out from under him. They toppled, one over the other side of the ring. Mateo's knuckles ached when he landed a fist on Romeo's jaw. Undeterred, Romeo scored a punch near Mateo's left eye. The skin bubbled with pain that Mateo barely felt. He used his legs to push Romeo off. The fire caught Romeo's shirt, and he jerked back, yanking it off. Mateo leapt back to his feet. Romeo stared at him from across the oval, wary now. "You're fast," Mateo panted. "But I'm stronger. Romeo, stop this madness and come to an agreement with me. I'm prepared to kill you today, but I don't want to." With a guttural shout, Romeo advanced again. Mateo waited. The 3 seconds it took Romeo to cross the oval seemed to slow to a lifetime. At the last moment, Mateo dropped to one knee and hooked an arm around Romeo's neck. Romeo's body snapped back, turning with a sweeping movement. Mateo moved with it as he pulled Romeo close, put his chest to Romeo's back, and dropped his weight on him. Romeo hit his knees. "Submit, brother," Mateo grunted. His other arm snaked around to reinforce the first. Romeo kicked, but Mateo's long legs wrapped around his waist. He rolled onto his back, tightening his body around Romeo like the Ghost Panther mare. A crushing elbow in Mateo's ribs almost forced him to loosen his grip for just a breath, but he held on. Ferocity kept his arms locked despite Romeo's squirmings. "Why?" Mateo yelled. Tears prickled the back of his eyes. "Why didn't you trust me? Why didn't you give me a chance?" The moments passed like hours, and a distant part of Mateo thought this must be another nightmare. This couldn't be the real thing, because back in the depths of his mind, in the furthest reaches of his soul, he hadn't really believed he'd be able to do it. Romeo's entire body tensed like a whip beneath him. He tried to thrash, but Mateo held too tightly. "Why?" Mateo shouted, even though he knew his brother wouldn't answer. "Why, Romeo? I always loved you." Romeo's pounding hand weakened. Mateo choked off a sob as he tightened his grip. For a moment, he faltered. The memory of Romeo's wide, terrified eyes when Per snatched him away haunted him. Romeo's movements slowed. Mateo choked on his own grief. A few more seconds. Just a few more. The fire vanished. Balta stepped through the smoking ring, one hand held out, and commanded, "Stop!" Mateo released Romeo. Romeo rolled to the side, eyes half open in a violent coughing fit. Balta pointed to the east, toward the harbor, with terror on his face. Fire dazzled the sea as boats burned bright in the harbor. Bodies could be seen in the light, jumping free of the ships and into the ocean. Mateo blinked several times. Cool air settled on his hot skin. Flames, dizzyingly high, lit up the sky behind Magnolia Castle. A loud, percussive sound issued from the top of the castle just before pieces of rock flew everywhere, collapsing the top of the bell tower. The tall structure crumbled in a pillar of dust. "By the givers," Mateo muttered. Romeo groaned as he tried to get his body under him. "The rebels," Balta cried. "They're setting fire to everything in the landowner coven. Some of them are headed to Nechi now. Look!" A mob of witches with torches was headed this way. Behind them, the east wing of Magnolia Castle had just started to burn. Thick, choking smoke billowed into the sky. Mateo stared at it, breathless. Torches couldn't have caused that explosion. The rebels must have something else, something dangerously flammable to have created such destruction in mere moments. Romeo gasped, head pressed into the ground. "It's only going to get worse, Mateo," he muttered, hoarse. "All of Nechi will burn, all of it." Draped down the front of Magnolia Castle was a sprawling banner, an ivory swan on an emerald background. That wasn't the sign of the rebels, nor was it anything he recognized. A booming sound came from the landowner coven, followed by a flash of light. Something explosive. Romeo's head dropped back to the ground as he wheezed for breath. "Finish this," he ground out. "Kill me now. Take your network and your life. You don't know what awaits you, Mateo. If you can't kill me now, you won't survive what's coming." Mateo pushed to his feet with a grimace. "I cannot win while both of our lives are in peril. The oval has already vanished. We stop the rebels together, then we return and let fate decide." Romeo glared at him. A captain transported to the top of the Eliza, near Balta. Soot stained his face and clothes. He doubled over, panting as if he'd run there. "Forgive me." He bowed to Romeo and Balta. "But rebels have overtaken the castle. They're torching the boats on the beach, threatening to kill all the landowners. The landowners are barricading themselves in the castle and fighting back, but the rebels have a powder. It's exploding rooms, setting things on fire. Not even magic can stop it. What do I do, sir?" he asked Balta. Balta looked to Mateo. "Stop this rebellion, Mateo," Balta muttered. "Right now. I will subdue every rebel that threatens any life." A second captain appeared, terror in his eyes. "Rebels in the orchard, sir, and the farmlands. They're all rising against the landowners. The landowners are transporting into the peninsula now, running for their lives. Everything is on fire." "Kill me now, Mateo," Romeo screamed, "or you will never win this throne. Prove yourself worthy." Without the roar of the flames in his ears, the sounds from below grew louder. Witches screaming, women running. Every road in Nechi was a mad scramble of fleeing bodies. Mateo ignored Romeo, ignored the unfolding chaos. His thoughts focused on Vittoria. Forget the law of rights. La Principessa needed to come now. Mateo looked at Balta and pointed to the oval, now a line of ash. "Can I leave it?" he asked. "The oval is gone," Balta said. "The fight has been jeopardized by outside circumstances. We will resume after the rebellion is quelled." Mateo cast one last glance at Romeo. "We are not done, brother." He transported away. He had his High Priestess to find.